May 2009 we started working on this idea of having a show here at Lopdell House and using the space. Our original idea was going to be a lot more three-dimensional and theatrical and exploring the idea of dioramas, which we did prior to leaving for the last residency in Scotland at the end of last year. And leading up to the earthquake, we were still working on the three-dimensional diorama idea. With the earthquake and the damage to the studio and the damage to a loss of the work, we had to rethink the idea, hence the new title. Originally the title was going to be Lost and Found, and we added this other dimension, which was Faculty of Wonder, Lost and Found.
It's like, you know, like in a fairy tale, you've got the sort of the span of human existence. It sort of goes beyond it. It plays out things that are just imagination, that can't be real, but at the same time they refer back to us as human beings, because they actually tell us something about us when we look at them, when we read them, when we think about them, experience them, because they bring pictures into our heads.
It's quite painterly, it's quite performative, it's quite theatrical. It has reference to printmaking and drawing and painting with light and video. I mean, it has a richness about the work, I think, that includes all of those things. And I think it's interesting because of that.
The big wall. It sort of came about that we wanted to still play out that theatrical element that you play out with the diorama, the creating an otherworldly kind of sense. And we were just looking at how we could achieve that in the time we had. And so we were really interested in this idea of creating this sort of assemblage, strange combination of actual performative photography and materials, colors. So it's pretty much like a big painting for us. It just includes some photography images in it.
I mean, it's a hugely complex, I think, and layered work, and I think there's a whole range of things in single readings of each of the photographic works, and I'd like that to be something that people bring. The long gallery here in this exhibition is totally works that were retrieved from the silt and the water and the debris from the studio floor, and those works were originally pristine old photographic works in black and white that have in various ways been transformed into new work for that long gallery. The layer of photographic emulsion on the surface is so delicate. Had we washed them, we would have washed away even more of it. Because they were in clumps and piles, we peeled them apart and allowed them to dry, and we've hand-coloured another layer. So we've brought a kind of jewel-like richness back to the work and imbued it with a new sense of importance by something that has happened. Instead of discarding, we've added that to the layer that was already there. And I think those works work really nicely in that they do bring in a delicacy, a lightness of touch, a new kind of sense of hope and light into what was pretty devastating.
Christchurch got mounted, really. It was a really it's a very close experience, and
we did lose our studio in the earthquake. It was in Bexley, and that was one of the worst hit areas because the ground is so unstable close to the coast. The liquefaction was really intense in that area. The buildings sank a metre into the ground. We were actually working in the studio when it happened, which was pretty hair-raising, and the waters were rising like really quickly in that area, so we had to get out as quick as we could and get away as the waters were rising. And it was directly after the quake happened, and we were out on the street driving, trying to make our way to a safe pace, but as the more we drove, the more destruction we saw around us, and people were really just wandering with blank looks on their faces and doing odd things. A lot of animals running around, all the dogs in areas really freaked out, and so there were a lot of dogs running in different directions, so nobody quite knew where to go, where was going to be safe.
The whole exotic garden was actually up on the wall when the earthquake struck, so it hasn't been damaged in that way. But when I went into the studio after, first time I could get back, I literally just ripped everything off the wall and where I could find things undamaged. And so some of them have got little dents in them, and a bit of a fingernail somewhere, and that's like part of that process of rescuing. And then we developed some more in relation to the work after, because that work was actually quite a central piece in the whole, before-after scenario. They're quite theatrical. Those works are quite otherworldly in a sense. They have a strong relationship to how we tell stories, or how we may or may not tell a story. That the juxtapositions we do trigger, sometimes a space that before hasn't been there. So it's a new potential is opening up through what we add, what we bring to it. All these images were black and white photographs we took, some of them in a museum situation and some of them performative afterwards. And I think it's not what they were before, it's what we've done to them that actually created this sort of otherworldly, exotic garden. They're quite intimate little scenarios. It's almost like you are hiding and looking at it. But the characters are too, so. I'm so glad we pulled through and did it. It's been quite a challenge for us in a lot of ways, but it's been, sometimes those times really make something very essential come through, and they make you realise that what you do, that why you do what you do, and why it's so important that you do what you do. Yeah.